In 1968, a mother and her daughter were staying in a hotel when the daughter woke at 4 a.m. to someone knocking on their door. She got up and opened the door. She was met with a man and woman stating that they were detectives, so the girl let them in. At this time, the mother was also awake. The two strangers told them that the girl's boyfriend was in a fatal car crash and that he was in danger, but then out of nowhere the woman held the girl hostage while the man knocked the mother out with some kind of cloth. The strangers left the building with the girl and brought her to their car, where they then sped off to a nearby dirt road. The strangers then ordered the girl to get in a fiberglass box under the ground, where she was buried alive for more than 3 days. At first, the strangers asked for a $500,000 ransom, but after that failed, they confessed to the whereabouts of the girl. The girl, Barbara Mackle, was rescued, and the two strangers, Gary Christ and Ruth Eiserman Shear, were sent to prison.
She was over the moon about winning the lottery, so why did she end up cut in half in a dumpster? It was the warm summer of 1996 near Boston in the US. Karina Holmer was a stunning 20-year-old girl from Sweden, and she was getting ready for a night out. She actually couldn't believe her luck. She was originally from Stockholm, but she'd always dreamed about traveling the world, and particularly traveling to the US. She just didn't have enough money to do it until she bought a scratch card and won over $1,000. She was like, oh my god, my dreams are coming true. I can finally move to the US. She got a job as an au pair for a family, and it seemed like everything was working out for her. The family she worked for was Frank Rapp, a photographer. He was pretty well known, and his wife Susan Nichter, who was a painter, and again, she was pretty talented. She was pretty well known in the area. They had 2 kids, and because they were so successful, they really needed some help around the house, like looking after the children. It seemed like the perfect setup for Karina and the family themselves. Now, she was a super friendly girl, so she was able to make friends very easily there, and on the 21st of June that year, she was meeting some of her friends for a night out. They headed to a well-known place in Dover Theatre District called Club Zanzibar. And obviously, because they weren't 21 yet, they used fake ID to get in. And Karina was having a great night. She was captured on cameras, dancing, singing, and just having a good time. Nothing to suggest she was worried or scared, but she never made it home that night. Now, Karina's friends had left the club before she did, and I don't know about you guys, but I feel like this does tend to happen when people are drinking. When big groups of friends are drinking, they just get split up. Some people like leave earlier than others, and it ends up just getting a little bit fractured. Some of her friends had left the club before she did. One was actually so drunk that she'd actually just passed out at the bar and got taken home by a bouncer. Karina was left alone though, which obviously wasn't ideal, and only one person for sure knows exactly what happened after that night out. Less than 12 hours after she was seen partying and dancing without a care in the world, a homeless man was rooting through a dumpster to find some food. Instead, he found Karina's arm. He panicked and alerted police. He was like, I think there is a dead body inside this bin. But it was more harrowing than that. Karina's body was indeed inside the dumpster, but she'd been mutilated. She'd been sawn clean in half. How the hell could somebody have done this to her and not been seen? She'd been sliced above her pelvis clean through. Her spine was severed. She also had rope marks around her neck. This had been an absolutely brutal murder. But weirdly, there was no sign of any kind of struggle. Investigators were stumped. They didn't actually really have a crime scene because they didn't know where this crime had taken place, and they couldn't find any kind of murder weapon. There was no eyewitnesses at all. There were rumors that Karina was dating a police officer at this point in her life, but he had apparently got a strong alibi. He was actually away on holiday at this point. So they questioned Frank, the dad of the family that she worked for. He couldn't seem to shed any light on what could have happened to her. He said that she usually just had the weekends off and went out and did her own thing. They weren't expecting her home for anything important. But the next detail is super controversial. Shortly after this murder, there was a fire in one of the bins near to the family home. Some people say this is super suspicious, like were the family trying to dispose of things? But other people were like, yeah, it is very suspicious. Why would the family do this if there was something to hide? It's not clear how or why the fire started, but police did examine the bin afterwards and nothing was found linking it to a crime, like no remains or anything. Another extremely eerie part of this case is that before Karina was murdered, she'd actually written to a friend saying something terrible had happened. She was like, "I'll explain everything to you in person when I get home," but obviously she was killed. What could this terrible thing have been, and could it have been linked to her death? Let me know your theories, because as of the present day, this crime chillingly remains unsolved.
You can try to convince me otherwise, but the Joplin tornado is by far one of the scariest, most disturbing, and deadly tornadoes to ever exist. And this is for multiple reasons. I mean, starting with the fact that 161 people died within 38 minutes. But then you have stories like Will Norton, the 18-year-old boy who had just graduated high school who was sucked out of the sunroof of his dad's car as the tornado hit. His dad was holding onto Will's legs so tight to try and save him that he broke his arm in the process. Will, along with many other people, disappeared for weeks after this deadly EF5 tornado struck. And knowing that some of the survivors contracted a flesh-eating bacteria just from the tornado is literally horrifying to think about. And not to mention the butterfly people that numerous children saw as the tornado struck, which is creepy all in itself. So again, you can say whatever you want, but the Joplin tornado is what nightmares are made of. So let's talk about it. The Joplin tornado is one of those disasters that you almost don't want to think about because the details feel too disturbing to actually be real. On May 22nd, 2011, an EF5 tornado dropped out of the sky and carved a 22-mile path straight through the city of Joplin, Missouri. The wind was blowing and screaming well over 200 miles per hour as if the storm itself was hunting. At the time it finally lifted, entire neighborhoods were shredded into splinters, and the terrifying part is how quickly it all happened. In just 38 minutes, entire blocks were wiped out, and 161 people never made it out alive. It's the kind of event that leaves you wondering how something so massive and violent can appear out of a normal-looking sky without warning and just take everything. The Joplin tornado is the 7th deadliest tornado in US history, and what makes it even more horrifying is its classification, an EF5, which is the highest rating on the enhanced Fujita scale. EF5 tornadoes are so violent that their winds exceed 200 miles per hour, powerful enough to level well-built homes, twist metal, and wipe entire neighborhoods off the map. These types of tornadoes don't just damage cities, they pretty much erase them. Exactly what it did. That day, when it seemed like Joplin was going to get a tornado, the community didn't really panic because that's what they're used to. The tornado warnings blared throughout the city, and just 24 minutes later, the Joplin tornado struck down. So this was a really short time frame that people had to work with to find shelter. What makes this tornado so particularly disturbing is that it was rain-wrapped, meaning that it was completely hidden until it was already right in front of them. People didn't see a funnel, just a wall of darkness, and then in an instant, the world around them was being shredded apart. By the time anyone realized what was happening, the tornado was already there, swallowing everything in its path, including them. Major hospitals were destroyed, even Joplin High School. More than 1,000 people were injured on top of the fatalities. 9,200 people were displaced, and over 4,000 homes and businesses were just no longer there. I think I read that the total economic cost was over $2 billion. Steel buildings that once stood tall were now rolled up like paper. Several trees were debarked, which is a super unsettling thing to see. And then semi-trucks were then wrapped around them. This is all very tragic, but then you start to hear some of the stories that the victims and survivors actually went through, like the Greenbrier nursing home. It was leveled in seconds, and that alone killed 21 people. Then came a local Pizza Hut that was right in the eye of the storm. The store manager, Christopher Lucas, is a hero in all regards, because he shoved all 4 of his employees and the 15 customers that were in his store into a walk-in freezer. But once inside, the door wouldn't stay closed, so Christopher tied it shut with a bungee cord that was wrapped around his arm. But sadly, he could only hold on for so long. Eventually, Christopher was sucked out into the tornado where he died. And I think the story that really sticks out the most to me when thinking about the Joplin tornado is what happened to Will Norton. Will was 18 years old when the tornado struck, and he, along with his classmates at Joplin High School, had just graduated. Thankfully, the ceremony wasn't actually in Joplin High School because that was leveled. The ceremony was held at a local university, and at first, everyone was so happy, as they should be graduating high school. Will in particular was super happy because he had just been accepted into Chapman's College of Film and Media Arts. Will was a very talented kid who loved Kat Von D, and he was a YouTuber. He filmed his everyday life, but he really loved to post comedy skits. He had so much potential and honestly had a really bright future ahead of him. But just as he was leaving his high school graduation ceremony, the tornado touched down. Right before he had tweeted, quote, "I just graduated high school. end quote. But not long after, he would become one of the first fatalities of the Joplin tornado. As Will and his dad were leaving the ceremony, he was on the phone with his mom and sister when they heard the tornado strike their car. Suddenly, they were right in the middle of this massive multi-vortex tornado, and even though they were both wearing their seatbelts, the tornado overcame them. Will was sucked out of the sunroof of the car, and his dad was holding onto his legs so tight to try and save him that he broke his arm in the process. All they could hear was the strong wind from the tornado and the sound of his dad praying very loudly, and then in an instant, Will was gone. He had been sucked out of the car, where his body was then thrown into a nearby pond. His dad suffered severe injuries and was later taken to the hospital, and Will was then lost in the aftermath, as were many people. After the tornado was over, the damage to the city was unreal, and it left finding victims really hard because of all the debris. Will was eventually found 10 days later in that same pond, but sadly he was deceased. After he died, Kat Von D made a drawing in his honor, and not only a baseball field was named after him, but he also had one of the highest scholarships at Chapman University named after him as well. He was so young, literally 18 years old, and only minutes had passed since he graduated high school. His whole life ahead of him just gone in an instant. It's just heartbreaking. According to his friends and family, Will could make anyone laugh, even in the toughest of situations. Not long before he died, he uploaded a video to his YouTube channel saying that he almost died after getting caught in a really bad thunderstorm. It's just sad that he went on to pass in a nearly identical situation not long after that post was made. This is the last photo of him, which was taken at his high school graduation just minutes before he died. Survivors of the tornado had to witness dead bodies just lying on the streets, and some even had to carry deceased children to their families. Since so many people died all at once, a temporary morgue was set up at a local university in Joplin. Semi-trucks with refrigerators were brought in to help store and process the bodies for identification, which was a really hard process because most of the victims were either unrecognizable or just not intact because of the extreme trauma from the tornado. Joplin has largely rebuilt since then, but it has never been the same. 18 people died by suicide following the devastating tornado, and domestic violence grew in the year following the disaster. A good portion of the community suffered from PTSD and depression as well. What's even scarier is that some people survived this horrific natural disaster only to contract a rare and aggressive fungal infection called mucormycosis. This is a flesh-eating fungus that was caused by fungus from the soil that was spread by the tornado's debris. This alone killed 5 people and seriously injured several more, which is super scary to have to live through. The last thing that I want to talk about when it comes to the Joplin tornado is the butterfly people. During the chaos of the Joplin tornado, multiple children claimed to have seen butterfly people, tall, winged, humanoid creatures, glowing through the rain-wrapped darkness, shielding them as the world tore apart around them. No adults saw anything, just several different kids insisting those soft, shimmering wings blocked the wind and saved them when nothing else could. It wasn't until the tornado passed that these similar stories, all from different kids who didn't even know each other, started to spread. Now the town is filled with butterfly murals, bright and gentle on the surface, but when you pass them, especially as the sun starts to set, there's a quiet unease, as if those wings aren't just painted memories, but remnants of something that was there that night, something beautiful and unbearably sad that never entirely left. Some specialists say that this phenomenon was actually just the result of mass hysteria, that the kids who saw these butterfly people were all of a sudden living through something so horrific that their minds made them up as a way to protect them from what they were actively seeing. Whatever it was, it's scary, but also beautiful. I want to know what you guys think about the butterfly people. I'm super curious, especially if you lived in Joplin during this tornado.
She carried a black trash bag in both hands, walked towards the dumpsters, threw it in, got back in her car, and drove off. But inside that trash bag wasn't only trash. Inside was her newborn baby, wrapped in a towel, umbilical cord still attached, left in a dumpster. Big warning at the beginning of this video, we're talking about a child. You guys already know what it is. Your mental health is #1 priority, always has been, always will be. If you think that listening to this is going to harm your mental health in any way, shape, or form, I mean it when I say skip this video. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in my next one. I love you. Alexis Avila is from Hobbs, New Mexico. That's where she lived with her family. She's the baby of the family and has 2 older siblings, 1 sister, 1 brother. And from what I could find, her childhood was completely what people would call normal and happy. She was a happy happy kid. She was loved, she was supported. As a little girl, she played sports, she got along with her siblings, got along with everyone at school. It wasn't until she really grew up and got into her teenage years that she began having a hard time. I think you could say that a lot of her behavior was what most people would consider to be normal teenage behavior. She had a lot of big mood swings. Her mood was completely unpredictable, and she was also the type to feel everything very intensely, to feel her emotions very deeply. As a teenager, she also began pushing her parents' boundaries, arguing often, questioning them, and just pushing their buttons really, and in turn that caused her relationship with her parents to be pretty rocky. She definitely was the kind of girl who leaned a lot more on her friends than she did her family. She would open up to her friends about what she had going on in her school life, her love life, her social life, all the things, but when it came to her parents, she wasn't likely to open up to them really at all. And I think at times that left her parents feeling quite distant from her. And all of that isn't completely unheard of, but there were little things that made her parents question if there was something deeper about her behavior going on, or with her behavior. And they found out that there was. Alexis was diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder. Unfortunately, she wouldn't be officially diagnosed with that until later on down the line. So even though the effects of having bipolar disorder were very much showing through her personality when she was just starting off in high school, they didn't know what it was, so her diagnosis was left untreated. In March of 2020, Alexis was 16 years old and going into her sophomore year of high school when she switched schooling from in-person to online, because we all know what happened in 2020. And for a person like Alexis, who already had a hard time bonding with her parents, being locked in her house 24/7 with limited ways to distract herself was going to prove to be very tough. By the time she got back into school in person, she was a junior in high school, and she got into a relationship with a 16-year-old boy named Steven. And in April of 2021, the couple found out that they were pregnant. I guess they took a pregnancy test as some sort of joke. I don't know what they were doing, but it was supposed to be a joke, but they saw that they actually were pregnant and they panicked. Alexis never wanted to be a teen mom. She freaked out, he freaked out, but then that was that. They find out that Alexis is growing a human being inside of her, and what do? They freak out for a few minutes and then they forget about it, I guess. Or they pretend to, because they were really acting like it was no big deal. Maybe showing a defense mechanism, I don't know, but they literally did not want to talk about it. One of Alexis's friend who knew her from freshman year would later say that she had heard her mention a pregnancy, saying, quote, "I heard her talk about being pregnant around late September, early October. She never expressed that it was a bad thing that she was pregnant," end quote. Although apparently her and Steven never talked about it. I would like to think that they did, but I really don't think they did. And in Alexis's head, she always knew that keeping the baby was not going to be an option. She wasn't ready to become a mom in any way, shape, or form. She also wasn't ready or willing to tell her family, and the very few friends that she did tell, she also let know that she wasn't planning on keeping it. A couple of months passed, and then there is trouble in paradise. The puppy love that was once there between Alexis and Steven was no longer, and it became so bad between them, to the point that police officers got involved, and Steven was not allowed to go to Alexis' house ever again. This sent Alexis into a chaotic, unstable state of mind. She was depressed, she was furious with Steven, but then she was standing up for him. She would get mad at him, but then she would get mad at her mom, and then the anger would just turn into sadness. It was bad all around, and Alexis ended up running away, but when she returned home, she just completely shut down, still not sharing with her parents the fact that she was pregnant, and still ignoring that situation altogether. And by August of 2021, Alexis and Steven called it quits on their relationship for good. That's also when she tells him the very, very sad news that she had lost the baby. Was that true? No. And was she lying to the baby's father? 1,000,000% yes. And by the end of 2021, only getting closer and closer to her due date, Alexis had managed to somehow, someway successfully hide her pregnancy from everyone around her. She was still ignoring it. She wasn't doing absolutely anything to address it, nothing to take care of herself or her baby. And according to her parents, they did notice that she was putting on weight, but they didn't really think much of it. She found out that she was pregnant in April of 2021. On January 7th of 2022, Alexis Avila gave birth on her own at home in secret in the bathroom. She woke up in the middle of the night because she was experiencing severe pain, went to the toilet, and delivered her baby. Did she wake anyone up? No. Did she tell anyone? No. Instead, the following morning, she wrapped up her newborn baby boy in a towel, grabbed a black trash bag full of trash, and put both the bag of trash and her baby wrapped in the towel in the back of her car. She drove around for a little while until she ended up driving to a big dumpster in a parking lot of a JCPenney, and then she grabbed the bag full of trash, opened it up, grabbed her baby wrapped in the towel, placed the baby in the trash bag on top of the trash, and tied it sealed tightly. Then she pulled up right next to the dumpster and tossed the closed bag with her baby in the trash, dumped it, and drove off. It's sick. It's vile. It's so disturbing. Not to mention, New Mexico has a safe haven law, meaning that under the law, a parent can surrender an infant that is 90 days or younger at a hospital, at a fire station, at any law enforcement agency. They could drop off the baby, no questions asked, and they would be protected from criminal prosecution for abandonment. Alexis could have dropped off her baby at any one of these locations to give him a chance, to give a loving family a chance at having a baby, which a lot of people would consider to be a miracle. But did she do that? No, she treated her baby as nothing more than a piece of trash. Alexis drove off, went home, and continued acting like nothing had ever happened. However, at 8 p.m. that same night, a group of 3 people, dumpster divers, went to the same dumpster in that JCPenney parking lot, and they were there to dig through the trash to see if they could find anything of value. They're digging through the trash when they hear crying, and they assume that it's coming from an animal. They keep digging until they find the black bag, pull it out, and that's when they make the horrifying discovery of finding the newborn baby boy, who had been inside of that trash bag in the cold in the dumpsters for well over 5 hours or more at this point. And as you can imagine, they were sick to their stomachs. The girl in the group immediately picked up the baby and held him in her arms. He was still alive, luckily somehow, because it was freezing outside, and he was clearly very weak but still crying. He was cold to the touch. The umbilical cord was still attached, and one of the guys called 911 to report what they just found. It is so sad. It is so incredibly sad. When paramedics arrived, the baby boy was still breathing, but he was struggling to be able to because he was so cold. His skin had completely turned blue and purple by that point. He was showing signs of hypothermia and low oxygen. He also had a cut on his head, assuming that that was from when the bag was thrown and his little head made contact with the metal dumpster. The baby was rushed to the hospital, and the doctors tried everything in their power to make sure that this little baby boy made it through the night, while a different group of officers worked on identifying who had done this. It did not take them long to identify Alexis Avila because her name was in a piece of trash that was found in the trash bag that the baby was found in. And they also quickly got a hold of the CCTV footage and only further confirmed who she was by running the license plate number. They showed up to her house. Her parents answered the door and said that Alexis could not come to the door because she was feeling really sick and she was in bed. But officers were not having it. They forced her to get out of bed and get to the station for questioning. And the interrogation of that is really something. Alexis is really something, and I mean that in a negative way. She does say the story of giving birth in the bathroom. She does tell him that, but she says that she found out that she was pregnant yesterday, as in one day before giving birth. Lie number 1. They say, interesting, a friend of yours actually told us that you were pregnant back in March and that you told this friend named Walker. And Alexis goes, no, I don't know a Walker. Lie number 2, she says that after giving birth, she was very, very scared and she didn't know what to do, but she does admit to putting her baby in the trash and then in the dumpster, saying, quote, I put it in the bag, I took it to the car, I drove around and I just didn't know what to do and I just put it in there, end quote. Alexis did try to defend herself by saying, quote, I'm the baby, end quote, and repeatedly stating that she had just turned 18 as if that was reason enough to excuse her actions. Stephen, the father of the baby, was made aware of the situation, and you can imagine the shock on his face when he found out that Alexis had lied about losing the baby. But by a true miracle, the baby boy made it through the night. He needed a ton of love and care and attention because he was so close to not surviving, but he did. And he was placed in the custody of Stephen, and him alongside of his family had been taking care of him. And it warms my heart to be able to tell you guys and to know that the little boy will grow up and hopefully live a very long and happy and healthy life. And I hope that he's able to accomplish every single dream he ever has. Alexis Avila was charged with 2 charges, and she was taken to court where again she made a fool out of herself by trying to say she didn't know any better because she was freshly 18. In my opinion, it was clear that she showed absolutely no remorse. If anything, she felt bad for herself and not her child. She pled not guilty but was found guilty and sentenced to 16 years in prison. But guess what? Her lawyers appealed. And she was let out on bail in 2023 pending her appeal. But now, on Monday, November 17th, the New Mexico Court of Appeals ruled that her conviction still stands and that she is to be sent back into custody. So that was earlier in this month. The latest update that I could find was from an attorney general making a statement that reads, quote, my office alongside District Attorney Deanna Luz prosecuted this case, and we are extremely fortunate that the child survived this horrific ordeal. My office will now focus on providing the support necessary to get Mrs. Avila remanded back into custody, end quote. I'm not sure how long the process takes. I hope that she is back in custody as we speak because I think that she deserves to be. Evil, evil, straight up evil. And it's so sad to think that there are human beings in the world that do this. That is all I have for today's case. Thank you guys for spending time with me today. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
She's known as the crazy, jealous stalker ex-girlfriend turned killer. She was with him for only 4 months and then brutally killed her ex-boyfriend because if she couldn't have him, then nobody could. Before infamy, Jodi Arias was a seemingly normal California girl. By all accounts, Jodi Arias was living a pretty charmed life. She was a pretty blonde girl from a normal family. She had lots of friends, she got good grades, she had lots of hobbies, she was really into photography. But Jodi was the kind of girl that seemed boy crazy. Like, she was the kind of girl that always had a boyfriend. And heading into 2006, Jodi was in a relationship when she met Travis Alexander. Now, Travis had a very rough upbringing. His parents were both addicted to substances and they were very neglectful and abusive. Sometimes they lived in a tent and would often go without food. But at 10 years old, the best thing happened to Travis and his siblings. Their grandparents brought them in and from then on raised them. They were devout Mormons and Travis got really into the faith. Overall, this was a really good time in his life when he was set up on a blind date with a girl named Jodi Arias. And they really hit it off. There was a very strong physical attraction. Like, they were hooking up a lot, sleeping together a lot, even though Travis was this devout Mormon and telling his other Mormon friends that he was waiting till marriage. For Travis, this thing with Jodi was a lot more about the physical stuff rather than having like an actual strong emotional attachment to Jodi. He was really attracted to her, but he didn't see anything like long-term or serious with her. He was looking for more of like a good Mormon girl. But the complete opposite thing is happening for Jodi. She thinks Travis is the one and she's completely obsessed with him. Even though she was never religious, she converted to Mormonism for Travis. And this is particularly insane because even though they're hooking up at the time, Travis is not her boyfriend yet, and she like converts to a whole other religion to be with him. Even though Jodi has a whole other boyfriend at this point, she still hasn't broken up with her actual boyfriend yet. Eventually, she does end that relationship to be with Travis, and the two officially start dating in 2007. And like I said, the main pillar of this relationship was definitely the physical stuff. Travis was not in this relationship as much as Jodi was. And the relationship ended after only being officially together for 4 months. But even after breaking up, they were still seeing each other and sleeping together. It was definitely Jodi pushing to still see Travis. She was just showing up at his place or would even break in. She would break in by climbing in through his doggy door. She's full on stalking her ex-boyfriend Travis at this point, slashing tires, breaking in. Even when Travis had other dates over, and she would threaten the other girls that Travis was seeing and threaten them not to see Travis anymore. And Travis would tell his friends about his crazy stalker, jealous ex-girlfriend. But even after all of this, even after being broken up for a year, they're still seeing each other. In June of 2008, Travis was supposed to go on a trip to Cancun with one of his friends, but no one was able to get in contact with him for almost a week. It was the night before they were supposed to leave for this trip, and this friend still couldn't get a hold of him. She's calling their other friends, but still no one had seen or heard from Travis in over 5 days. So all of his friends go over to his place and they're knocking on the door and they're getting no answer, so they actually break in. And the second they go inside, they immediately get hit with the terrible smell of death. Travis's bedroom door was locked, so they break down the door and there's blood everywhere. Blood all over the bedroom that leads to the bathroom, that leads to the shower where they found Travis's body. This was an extremely brutal murder. Travis was shot in the head, stabbed 29 times, and his throat was cut so deep that he was almost decapitated. And surprisingly, Travis had 2 roommates that were just living in the same house with his dead body for almost a week. His friends call 911 and immediately they're pointing fingers at his crazy ex-girlfriend named Jodi. She was actually not hard for the investigators to find at all. because Jody actually called the police herself to see if there was anything she could do to help in the investigation. Jody told the investigators that Travis was her ex-boyfriend, but now they were just friends. She hadn't seen Travis in a while, and she was actually on a road trip right now. And she actually did try to get a hold of him the day that he was killed, and she left him a voicemail. This is a voicemail that she left for Travis's phone hours after he was already killed.
Guys, I wasn't getting back to anybody. And what else? Oh, and I drove 100 miles in the wrong direction. Over 100 miles, thank you very much. So yeah, remember New Mexico? It was a lot like that. Only you weren't here to prevent me from going into the 3 digits. So fun. Tell you all about that later.
So Jody claims that she was absolutely not at Travis's house the day that he was killed, but investigators found evidence to prove that that was a lie. Whoever murdered Travis actually tried to clean the scene, and they actually ran a load of laundry. And in the washing machine, police found a camera. The killer clearly thought that running this camera through the wash would destroy any evidence, and it did break the camera, but it did not destroy the SD card that actually holds the photos. What was found in those photos was horrific. At first, the photos just show Travis and Jody together in bed. But moments later, photos were taken of Travis's dead body. This is the last haunting photo of Travis Alexander. This photo was taken just moments before the photos were taken of his dead body after he was killed. So it's believed that Jody took this photo just as she was about to kill him. So he knew that he was about to die in the photo. In custody, Jody denies absolutely everything, even while she's confronted with the evidence and the photos. Jody infamously had a very bizarre interrogation, where she does handstands and sings and even giggles and talks to herself.
Still beating. Oh, holy night. The stars are brightly shining. This is the day of our dear Savior's birth.
She was charged with first-degree murder, where she smiled in her mugshot. Over the years, she has changed her story many times because Jody is a liar. This time she changes her story and says that she was at Travis's house because obviously clearly there were photos of her there, but that 2 people broke in and they killed Travis right in front of her. While awaiting her trial, she maintained her innocence. She also did a lot of interviews where she said that she was very confident that she would be found not guilty.
No jury is going to convict me.
Why not?
Because I'm innocent, and you can mark my words on that one. No jury will convict me.
Her trial began in January of 2013, and the prosecution was seeking the death penalty because that's what Travis's family wanted. This case was absolutely everywhere. There was so much media and public attention on it. Like, my dad watched the entirety of the trial, and there were crowds of people out every single day outside the courtroom. In her trial, she still maintained her innocence, but this time she had a new story on how Travis was killed. She confessed to being the one that killed him, but said that it was in self-defense. Not only did she murder Travis Alexander, but now she wants to just ruin his reputation. She said for the entirety of their relationship that he was abusive and that he would also SA her. But she also accused him of being a PDF file and said that he had CP of little boys, and that the night that he was killed, he tried to kill her, so she had to act in self-defense. Jodi Arias took the stand in her own defense, and she was on the stand for 18 days. But ultimately, she was found guilty. But the jury couldn't come to a decision if she should get the death penalty or if she should get life in prison. So there was a mistrial, and the second time the same thing happened. They couldn't agree on death penalty or life in prison. So instead of going through the entire process a third time, Jodi Arias was given life in prison without the possibility of parole. And she has shown no remorse, no regret, and has never apologized. She has appealed many times and maintains her innocence to this very day. And that is the case of Jodi Arias. It's absolutely insane. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments. But while you're there, please be respectful. This is Travis's story. He does have siblings. He does have friends and family that could be in the comments. So please be respectful. And while you're there, please let me know what case you want to see me cover next. I know this was a really long video, so thank you so much for making it to the end and listening to the entirety of Travis's story. Thank you to everyone that suggested that I cover this case, and I will see you guys all next time in my next video. please be a good person to your fellow person.
I was on YouTube and ran across this YouTube video titled, "I was sold to the highest bidder for my organs," and I, much like you probably are right now, was completely taken aback. It's a video of Loretta Lyon telling her story. As a teenager, around the age of 17, she was kidnapped by what has been described to be an organ harvesting gang. She was held captive for 6 months, and just when you think the story cannot get any worse, it does, many times. And I think that everyone should hear the story, so we're gonna talk about it. Loretta was born in Yugoslavia in the 80s, and growing up, she was a happy kid. Her parents had unfortunately struggled with having children, so when they had her, they looked at her as their little miracle. When she was a baby, her parents moved to what is now known as Serbia, and the place in which they lived was surrounded by a lot of land, farming villages, woods, mountains. Her mom was a professor, her father was a doctor, and he was the person that she looked up to the most. At the time of the story, she had decided that she had the same drive that her father did for wanting to help people, and she knew that she wanted to follow in his footsteps and study medicine as well. But the civil war in Yugoslavia and everything that came along with it would get in between that. Loretta has said that her greatest gift in life was not only the love that her parents gave her, but the love that she had for her parents and still does. And to explain the Yugoslav civil wars in very simple terms so you guys don't get confused, because this is a lot of information I'm about to throw at you, but basically Yugoslavia, the country, was made up of a lot of different states, different groups, different ethnic groups, religion, histories, etc. They all wanted to split up, and different parts of Yugoslavia went to war with each other. This lasted years, and it was a horrible, massive war zone. That environment made it incredibly easy for criminal groups to operate because there really wasn't a stable government or really any real police protection. People were hiding, running, starving, trying to escape the country. Kidnappings were tragically common, especially of young women. Many people did not survive, and it really felt like things just kept going from bad to worse. Loretta and her family were taken away from their house by soldiers alongside of a big group of people and into the mountains, clueless as to why or what was going on. And it was her uncle who stood up to the soldiers basically to negotiate and offer everything that he had of value in exchange for the soldiers to keep them alive. And it worked because her uncle gave up basically everything that he had of value. The soldiers then left the big group of people marching up the mountain, uncertain in the dark and in the cold. Everyone was panicked, babies were crying, but Loretta and her family eventually made it back to town, realizing that their uncle's bribe had worked and they had spared them of their lives, really. He had pretty much saved the village because of what he did, and after that night, Loretta's dad knew that he had to make sure that Loretta fled. He needed her to leave the town, pack a bag, and leave the village because the soldiers were very clearly targeting young women, and he told her that if she stayed, she was not going to make it. So her mom helped her pack a bag, and off she went into the night to cross the mountain to seek help. She was young, scared, alone. When she reached the other side of the mountain, she described it as seeing no life because the streets were dark and empty. The only sign of life was coming from this little restaurant type of place, so she walked in there to ask for a glass of water and immediately broke down and started crying. Shortly after, two men, Peter and Brian, who were police officers that served for the United Nations, walked in. They saw her and they pretty much took her underneath their wing. They knew that it wasn't safe for a 17-year-old girl to be alone anywhere, and they took her, they gave her shelter, they let her stay under their roof and cared for her. And even though Loretta was terrified, she felt like she had no other option but to trust them, and she did, and they kept her safe for about a month, but unfortunately that did not last forever. One day, while Peter and Brian were out working, Loretta decided to go outside of the apartment to go and find a magazine. But as soon as she walked out, a black van drove straight to her, completely blocking her path. A group of men jumped out, one of them placing a black bag over her head, and another one grabbed her and threw her inside of the van. They closed the door and drove off. She had no idea where they were going. She was petrified, unable to see anything around her until the van eventually stopped. One of the men carried Loretta out of the van, more like dragged her out of the van and into this scary looking building. They put her in a dark, cold room where a man was waiting for her. They ripped the bag off of her head, and for the first time she was able to see her surroundings, but before she knew it, she was on her knees on the ground, a group of men staring down at her, some of them pinning her down, when one of them instructed the others to flip her over and SA her. Loretta started crying, screaming, trembling in fear, now understanding what was about to happen to her, and she yelled at them to stop, saying that she had never ever done anything with a boy or a man before. And when she made that comment, the men did stop, but not because they felt bad for her, of course not, but because knowing that, they now looked at her as being quote unquote pure, and they knew that they would be able to get a lot in exchange for her because she was pure. The man who appeared to be in charge of everyone stopped the men and said, quote, "Boys, we have stumbled across a huge cargo. We have a lot of work to do with her," end quote. Loretta would soon come to find out what that meant. For the next days, turning into weeks, the men trained her. This 17-year-old girl, they trained her on intimate acts. She was forced to watch the men do horrific things to other women women and girls in order to teach her, or show her rather, what certain things looked like to prepare her for her to be ready for when they gave her in exchange for valuables to the highest bidder. It's awful. You say these things out loud. It's hard to comprehend that they actually happened. Lorada has said oftentimes that she would become sick from what she had to witness. Their plan was to get her ready for the men to pay the highest value. She would then be taken, shipped away, and used, treated in every inhumane way you could possibly ever think of. And once they were done with her, once everybody was done with her, she would then be looked at as having no more value. And then they would take her organs, any vital organs that she had left, they would be taken and sold into the black market. That's what she gathered by witnessing everything that she did and hearing the conversations around her and seeing it happen to other girls firsthand. She said that they even told her what they were going to do because they had done this many times before, and she said that when they would tell her, they found it hilarious. It was comical to them talking about their plan. It was more so routine by that point. I cannot comprehend or even begin to try and understand the level of fear anyone would be in that situation. When Lorada was deemed as ready, they put her in the car to be transported to wherever they were taking her. They made the drive and they reached the border, but the border was closed. And police officers there told them that they could not cross and sent them back to wherever they came from. You can imagine the relief that Lorada felt when they were turned away from the border. When they got back to their apartment, the boss man was around and he got pulled away on a phone call. He was getting really agitated on the phone. He walked away. The other two guards standing around Lorada also got distracted for a moment, and she knew that if she got a chance to escape, it would be one chance, and that one chance was now or never. The boss directed one of the guards to get rid of Lorada, saying that she had proved to be way more trouble than what she was worth, and directed the guard to just get rid of her. But for whatever reason, thankfully, the one guard that was left with her gave her the one thing that she asked for, and what she asked for was for just a few minutes to pray. She wanted to pray. The guy allowed her to, and he set his belongings down on a nearby table and walked off to use the bathroom. One of the things that he set down on the table before walking off for a moment were his keys. And the second Lorada was left alone, she grabbed the keys off the table and she made a run for it. She kept thinking over and over again that she just had to get a hold of her parents because she wanted to be able to tell them where she was and what was about to happen to her so that they would not spend the rest of their lives wondering where she was and if she was still alive. Lorada, using the sliver of hope and strength that she had left, grabbed the keys. There were two doors in between the room that she was in and the outside, and she was moving as fast as she could but as quietly as she could so the guard wouldn't hear her trying to escape. She made her way to the first door. It was a big wooden door and she was able to get through that one door without anyone hearing her, but the second door, that one was locked, and that one was a loud, heavy metal door. She knew that she wasn't going to be able to open that one quietly, so she started to play around with the keys to try and figure out which one fit, which is when the guard, heard her, started yelling at her and running towards her, but luckily she found the key. And she pushed the door open and fell onto the street outside where she saw what looked to be a police car. She crawled on the ground when officers noticed her, but by that point the guard had also made it outside, and he had now ran out to the street chasing after her. The one guard pulled out his weapon and that was going off. The police officers also pulled out theirs as well. So Lorada was on the ground quite literally trying to crawl her way to safety without getting injured, but she managed to. One of the officers grabbed her and pulled her into his Jeep, and she made it, and they took her to the station to be questioned while other officers remained right outside of where she had just escaped from, calling all units for backup. By the time that she got to the station and she was interviewed, she was obviously still so scared and clueless of what was going to happen to her. It was now 3 a.m. And one of the officers there, a man that was close to her father's age, after the interview asked if he could give her a hug. He was in tears, fully crying from just listening to her story. She refused the hug because she was rightfully so still so scared of everyone and unsure of who she could trust. But that officer looked at her and said, quote, "Do you know you are the only survivors to ever come out of these people," end quote. He said to her, "We know what's happening in there. We know what they're doing, but we cannot bring them to justice because we have never had a witness." They told her that she was the only witness that had ever lived to tell her story, which only scared her more because that meant that she was the only witness that was still alive, and it meant that those men would come after her to get rid of her for sure. The police took Lorada back to Peter and Brian, remember the two men who had helped her out and kept her safe. They took her in for the night, fed her, gave her a blanket, and stayed up with her throughout the entire night, cared for her, until the next morning when she had to cross the mountain again and return to her family, return to her village, even though she was not safe there. She couldn't stay where she was because she knew that those men would come after her and they would get rid of her in a second. So she went back home to her family. Thankfully, her parents were still alive, and obviously everyone was so happy and relieved to see her alive, but still so scared about the fact that she had returned because their town was still so far away from being safe for anyone, let alone a young woman. Her mom actually, instead of hugging her and telling her that she was glad to see her, she became hysterical, crying because she was so scared for her. And she should have been, because the next thing they knew, there was a group of men, soldiers, in a massive truck pulling up right to their house to take her. And in a matter of seconds, Lurata was once again being ripped away, physically ripped away from her family. She was taken, pulled into this big military truck, leaving her parents behind her, crying out for her. She was driven into the mountain, dropped off at this building that looked to be like an abandoned building where she would be kept for the next 6 months. The treatment that she experienced there was horrible in every single shape, way, and form. She was left with trauma not only from the SA that she had to endure, but from other ways and things that were done to her. She had a broken nose. She was always 24/7 absolutely covered in injuries. Those days turned into weeks. They turned into months of her being trapped in this dim, small room in solitary confinement. And when she was there, she felt herself withering away. Her parents saw her being taken, so she no longer felt hope to stay alive for them, to be able to tell them that she was okay, to tell them that she had not abandoned them. They saw her being taken away, and they knew that she probably wasn't going to return back home, so she really felt like she had absolutely nothing left to hold on to. And she remembers that gave her a really strange feeling of closure and peace. She remembers thinking that everything that made her her was taken away from her by what she described to be men that were turned into monsters during the war. This is a quote from her, quote, "The 6 months were a profound experience for me, initially filled with resentment and hate. I mirrored their hostility until I realized it was consuming me. Despite the suffering, I refused to let them strip me of my humanity. Instead, I chose empathy, even pity, recognizing their own twisted reality. I clung to my sense of kindness, refusing to let them break my spirit or my sanity," end quote. Throughout those 6 months, what Lurata did not know was that her father was not giving up on the search for her. Her dad, with the help of a sympathetic police officers that he had known for a while, managed to figure out where she was being kept, because her dad was a doctor, remember, so he had been working with soldiers, because no matter what was going on, he was still expected to be one of the designated doctors who was helping people who were hurt. And the two of them together came up with this plan to rescue her in the middle of the night. They had to make sure that it was dark out when they went to rescue her to limit their chances of being caught. And then her dad went to go and find her. When the door opened and Lurata saw her dad and heard his voice, she could not believe it. She was so weak by that point. She could hardly even stand. All of her wounds were infected. She had broken teeth, a broken nose, I think also a broken jaw. But seeing his face was the one and only thing she needed to gather up enough strength to get out of there. Her dad covered her up, got her in the car, and drove her back to go and see her mom. When her mom saw her, she broke into tears. Both of her parents helped Lurata the entire night with her injuries. And it was only when she was lying on her mom's lap that night that she finally was able to feel a sense of safety again. After her rescue, her dad again came up with a plan to get her out of that country, because it was obvious that she was no longer safe there. Her dad, with the help of a police officer, got a truck that was being used in import-export activities. They used that truck to hide her in it and drive her away. She waved goodbye to her parents, still so scared but trusting in her dad's judgment. And with a very heavy heart, she hopped in that truck and hid inside of it until they made it all the way to the UK. It wasn't until they were actually in the UK that she came out of hiding and she was finally safe. Lurata was able to go to university, follow the dream that she always had. She became a British citizen, and 5 years after that, she was finally able to reunite with her parents again. She became a personal trainer, which was a huge turning point for her, because she found that fitness was something that really helped her be able to manage her emotions. And it makes me so happy to say that she also found love. She got married, and today she's not only a survivor, but she's also a motivational speaker, an author, a public speaker, and a lifestyle coach. The strength of this woman is literally out of this world. And I retold her story after hearing her tell it, but I think obviously it is the most impactful listening to the story in her own words, considering she survived and fortunately lived to tell her story, which often is not the case in cases like this. So I will leave the link to the YouTube video that I saw in the comments, but I want to end this video with a quote from her. Quote, "Life offers us choices regardless of the challenges we face. We can opt to remain victims or embrace survival and growth. Every setback is a lesson, not punishment. It's about recognizing both the good and the bad in people and situations and making choices that empower us. Starting the day positively, replacing self-criticism with affirmations, and surrounding ourselves with possibility sets the tone for success. We cannot control how others treat us, but we can control our responses and our journey towards making a difference in the world," end quote. Tell me that's not the craziest story you have ever heard, and I'm so happy that it was a survival story. I don't even know what word would do justice to describe her. She is incredible. Sorry about the lighting throughout this video. As you can tell, the sun was setting while I was filming, which did not take me that long, but I live in the Midwest, so the sun sets in like 5 minutes at 2 p.m. Anyway, that is all I have for today's story. Thank you for spending time with me today and for listening to Lorada's story. Hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.